Okay. So I'm not going to start with Git right away because some of you are don't really know what it's about. So this presentation we gave before, it was by another one of our admin team. So when it says me, it's not really me, but that's fine. Oh, sure. Actually. So like maybe the first half or I don't know, 20 minutes will be like about what Git is and how it can be helpful, and then we'll try and do like a code along to sort of see how it works and practice a bit. So I don't know how many of you have seen PhD comic where you write final.doc and then you send it to your prof and you get final revision 2, and then he sends more comments. It's final revision 6 and then it's final revision 22, final really I'm done with grad school .doc or something. That's your poor man's sort of version control. Like I'm just gonna save a bunch of copies of things. Hopefully keep the thing like working document version 2, version 3, version 4. And well, hopefully we can do something a little bit saner. Keep track of things a little bit better. So version control is basically trying to save the changes or save like snapshots or that sort of thing. Where if like Dropbox, it will sort of sync everything for you, and that's great for keeping your computers in sync. But the point of version control is more to say, okay, this is a coherent thing now, as opposed to here are these 20 different copies of my thing when I change one letter or something like that. So it'd be like, I implemented this change and this is an actual thing that I want to save or whatever. The event probably mentioned something about Git and GitHub. So see how they're related. Git is the command line software that actually does the version control. It's written by Linus Torvalds, who also writes Linux and stuff like that, because the kernel ran out of some other version control. And then GitHub is a sort of kind of like social Git, where it sort of helps to keep track of your issues and then keep track of like changes from other developers who want to say, they make a change and they make an enhancement or they fix a bug or something, and then you can help. It can also keep track of that sort of stuff, and then you can comment on things and be like, this is a nice change, or I don't want to accept this change or whatever. And so then that gives you a nice web interface that you can use to look at everything. There's also something called GitHub Desktop, which is software made by GitHub, which makes sort of a graphical view of Git for you. At the moment, we're probably just going to talk about Git just because it helps to really learn the internals of it and how it works. But the graphical interfaces are not a bad thing to use either. So this is not actually me, whoever wrote this, but I won't lie, Git is a bit hard. Got some weird quirks that, sometimes don't make sense, but at least for working on, your own work by yourself or maybe with your professor or something like that, it should be fine to go. But of course, if you're doing version control and just have like, a folder for every day, after a while, you're going to forget what all those folders are about and why you even made them and that kind of stuff. So I want to try and get something a little bit more structured. So I is not me, but somebody was forced to use GitHub for this group. And so now they learned how to get comfortable with commands and use power to Git to hopefully save you from yourself. Apparently there are 5 steps to get into full Git. First, you just realize that you need to use version control, which is hopefully all of you because you're here. Then you get some frustration because of your manual version control stuff. You have some colleagues who ask you to use GitHub, maybe. You overcome the large initial barrier to Git because it's confusing, maybe unclear, and the errors don't make sense. Hopefully none of that happens today, but I can't guarantee anything. And then at some point you get like a Git save me convert experience where you're like, oh, Git is awesome. You may not know what all these other things are, but Subversion, CVS, and Mercurial are other types of version controls that have different sort of commands and different background usages. And then Git is the black line and GitHub is green, but I think this is actually kind of old because, you know, it should be a little bit higher. But it's really blown up now, and it's really probably the dominant version control system, at least among open source, and not necessarily in companies, but it's certainly got pretty high traction. I don't know what that's there for. So like I said before, it's kind of like a time machine, or kind of like Dropbox, or kind of like whatever that Mac thing was, I forgot now. Back in time, something like that. Where you can go back to the past and say like, okay, you know, I want to look at what my code was a while ago, or my paper, how it looked like last year, or whatever. But it's more explicit in that, unlike Dropbox, which will save a copy necessarily maybe every time you save it, or every time it can sync, whatever. You tell it when you actually want to save the thing. Now this sounds like it's more work, but it's also in a way less work in the future because you know exactly what it was that you committed exactly. So this save change is called the commit. Another term you want to call it is like a snapshot of what your code looked like at a certain point in time. A repository is just a collection of files where you store your work. So a repository is made up of commits, which are a bunch of snapshots back in time, and a bunch of files which you can add or remove as you will. On GitHub, there's something called the fork, which is a complete copy of that repo owned by you. When we get to the GitHub side, we'll see why that's important or not important, but just for now, you just sort of know the terms. And the other term is a clone, which is a copy of the repository on a computer or on a specific computer, say your laptop or your desktop in your office or wherever that may be. So one of the advantages of Git is that it's distributed, as opposed to, say, CVS or Subversion, which has a central server. So what this means is that you have a full copy of all the changes that were ever made in your clone. And this can be both good and bad. I mean, it's good because it means that you can work anywhere with your laptop, you know, on a train or something with no internet. You can save those changes into your clone and it will be saved permanently there. But also, it means you have to kind of keep track of all the other copies if, you know, they get out of sync or something like that. If you're just working by yourself, though, this is pretty easy to take care of. When you start working with like a big group, then maybe it's a bit more work. But if you're only working in, you know, like 2 or 3 in a lab or something, it's not that hard to track. Okay, so what we need to do is, let me see if this is the last one. Yes, okay. What we need to do is first is to set up some stuff. So configure Git, make a fork and a clone and commit and the history and that sort of stuff. So first things first, I'm gonna go to terminal. How many people are familiar with the terminal? I see like 50-50, okay, maybe, okay. So the terminal is, should be called terminal on Macs. It might be man shell or git bash on Windows, that sort of thing. So what it is a text-oriented interface to your computer, so you can type a command like hello world or something, and it should print out hello world, whatever. So we don't really need to know too much about the terminal, except that something like pwd will do print working directory. So at the moment I'm in like UFDcoder's home directory, and cd, which will change directory. So cd desktop. Desktop. The other thing you should get used to is pressing tab for tab completion. So I did, well, first I'll say what ls is. So, and then the other command is ls, which stands for list. So list what's in directory, and currently my desktop is empty, so there's nothing there. But if I go back, going back is cd with 2 dots. List here, I have some folders, directories, if you want to call it. And so tab completion is if I take cd and I type d and I press tab twice, tell me what it can complete with. So at the moment there's 3 things that end with or start with D. I'm going to go into desktop, and this is currently empty for me. For you, there might be shortcuts or something in your desktop, depending on what you use your computer for. So what we're first going to do is configure Git. So first, if you run git -- version, it should print something like Git version 2.17 or 14 or something. Then you know it's working. If it doesn't work, please let me know. Yeah. Oh, sure. Okay, everybody's good? So first thing I'm going to do is configure Git. So first thing it needs to know is like who you are. So we're going to type git config user.name, and I'm going to go with like UFDcoders. You can put whatever name you want, really. But this will identify you in your commits. We'll see what that actually means in a little bit, but really, if you're working by yourself, it doesn't matter. But when you start working with other people, I mean, you want to at least differentiate what you've changed with what other people have done. Oh, well, I forgot about them. So, oh, I forgot. So if you're in the terminal, you can press up to get your previous command. Go over here and type in -- global. So what I really want is git config -- global user.name UFDcoders. And the other thing you want to tell it is your email address. So git config -- global user.email UFDcoders gmail.com. Make sure you use your email, otherwise this will be confusing. And then you can do git config config -- global -- list. And at the moment, I have not really any options except for the username and the user email. The other thing you want to set probably is your editor, because otherwise it will open something that you don't maybe not necessarily understand. That's git config global core.editor something. I think I have Nano installed, so put Nano. If you're in Git Bash, I think Nano should be installed. Well, let's check. If I run Nano, you get a thing. Editor. How many people get that editor properly? Yeah. If you're don't have it installed, that's okay. You can set it to something else.
Right. What's the previous stuff again?
Nano. So the little hat hair at the bottom means you press Control. So to exit, you press Control X. So there are ways to set Git to use a different editor. So I will leave that link. So there's a list here of a bunch of different editors if you want to use them. If you want to use like Atom or Sublime Text or something like that. I'm going to copy this link and put it over here on the event issue. So if you want to use something other than Nano, you can go look at that link and set it up. Because some of them are not obvious. Like I don't know what any of those things at the end there mean. So yeah. So for now, I'm going to use Nano. But if you want to use something else, you can configure it to use your favorite text editor. So to set Nano, I'm going to say git config global core.editor Nano. And if I go list everything, I should have Nano set. And maybe one other thing you want to set is color.ui auto. Makes stuff look nice. Yep.
So we can change the code editor to core editor later on.
Yeah. You just run the same command again, but you use a different path or whatever the command was on the over here. You can run it again later. The link is there, so you can go check the link. So I'm going to set the color to be auto, and that's just because it looks nice. You don't have to do it, but fine. Okay, so now I'm in the desktop. Hopefully everybody else is in the desktop. So PWD should print something like home, your name / desktop or something like that. Doesn't matter too much where you are really, but it's fine. So we're going to start completely fresh. So we're not going to touch GitHub for a little bit. What time is it? Still got lots of time. So I'm going to make a directory like sandbox. Let's call it sandbox. To make a directory, it's mkdir. You could also go to your like Windows Explorer and make a directory if you want. Fine, doesn't matter how. I'm going to change to the sandbox. Can everybody see at the bottom there? Is that okay? Yeah.
I did the following steps, previous steps, not on my desktop.
Yeah, that doesn't matter because of the global flag. It will be set for everything. So I'm going to change directory into sandbox. So if we look at sandbox, I'm in sandbox, and if I look, it's empty because I just created this directory. There's nothing in it. So the first step I'm going to do is git init. And it says something about initializing empty Git repository. And what that does is set up some hidden folders and stuff that Git will use to track the files that you have in the repository. So if I look at ls, I see nothing because it's hidden. ls-a should show me the .git folder. That .git folder is what holds all of your commits and your changes and tracks everything that you have. So you can delete whatever you like, but don't delete that because that will get rid of your entire one. I've actually deleted everything. So, but of course, when you start using GitHub, you can sync it up there and you don't have to worry about accidentally deleting stuff.
All right.
Yep.
Explain again what the Git I-90 does.
So git init creates this .git folder or directory here. And I mean, we can look at init. It's got like a bunch of stuff that Git uses to track your files and the changes that were made to it. So like branches, we won't get into that today because that's a bit more advanced, but like objects and refs would be like saving your files as they were at a certain point in time. And like there may be like a config for this specific clone or whatever. But you don't really need to worry about what's in there. Just don't delete it and you'll be fine. So I'm going to edit a file. So call it planets.txt. Say Mars. Doesn't really matter what I write in there, but I'm going to break something. For now, I'm not going to do anything fancy. I'm just going to work with like text files. I mean, you can start working with code or whatever, but to get the hang of things, I'm just going to work with text. So I'm going to save that, which is Control O, and just press Enter to save with the file that I gave it, and Control X to exit. If I look here, I have planets.txt now in that directory. I mean, yep. Control, well, if you look at the, I'll open it again. If you look at the bottom, it has a list of commands to do. So right out here is the caret with no. So the caret means control. So Control O writes out the file. And then it prompts for the file name, which was the name I gave it originally. And I just press Enter, and then Control X to exit now. So right now, I have a file there, but Git doesn't know anything about it. It's just a file that happens to be there. So what you need to do is tell Git that, I want you to keep track of this file. So you do something called git add planets.txt. And what that does is it tells Git, okay, I want to keep track of this file, and this is how it should look at this point in time. And then, but for now, all you've done is say, okay, this file is interesting. You haven't actually saved like a copy of it or made a snapshot of anything yet. So what we do to do that is git commit. And what it should do is automatically open up Nano because I set the core editor to be Nano. If you don't get Nano, you maybe didn't configure it right. But let me know what it looks like, and I can probably figure out what to do. So it comes up here with a little set of comments that say what you're actually doing, or like describe what you're doing. So it says, please enter a commit message for your changes. So what happens is that when you want to save a snapshot, you got to say what you're doing. I mean, it doesn't have to be anything particularly interesting. I mean, I can just be like first commit or something. Or, but what you really want to do is be descriptive, just so that if you're looking at your history and you're trying to figure out why you did something, you have some idea of what's going on, right? I mean, if you don't actually give it a descriptive message, then you're going to be kind of lost in the future in like 6 months or whatever. So, but since it's the first commit, it's really not really anything to describe, so I'm just going to say first commit. And then hit Control O. Some default file name, it's fine. Control X. And then you get a message that says something like one file change, one insertion, create mode, something or other. Doesn't really mean anything to you probably, but yeah, this works. Anyway, what it means is that, well, one file change I think is self-explanatory. It means that one file changed. One insertion is sort of a summary of how the files have changed. So at the moment, really, I only added one line, so it says one insertion. If you're working on, some complex code, you delete a whole function and then you rewrite it again, then that summary will say, you deleted 50 lines and added 100 or something like that. It's just sort of an idea of how much is going on in commits. And then the create mode is just saying that Git has recorded that you've added a new file. The mode doesn't really matter that much. at least for now. So the other thing you want to look at is, now I've told you like how to do stuff, but the question is, how do you know what's going on? So that command is git status. And at the moment, because I've committed everything and I haven't made any new files and I haven't deleted any new files, I haven't changed anything really, it says that we're on branch master and there's nothing to commit and working tree is clean. So branches we won't really go into, but for the time being, we'll be on master branch. And the nothing to commit working tree clean says that, as far as Git is aware, nothing has been changed or deleted or added or moved or anything like that. And everything's good like that. So let's actually do something. So I'm going to edit plans again. And let's say Pluto is something like that. I don't know. Something like that. And save that. And exit. And if we look at the status again, the output has changed a bit. So it says now that there are changes not staged for commit, and that planlist.txt has been modified. And it also gives you a little hint of what you want to do, what you might want to do after this. So git add file will update what will be committed, or git checkout will discard changes. So before we do our next step, let's find out what actually changed. So the step for that is git diff, or the command for that is git diff. And what that shows you is a diff, but it shows you the difference that are in the working directory compared to what Git thinks it should be. So you see here that, there's some information about like what Git thinks the status is, but here we're talking about planlist.txt, and you see here is a little plus sign and screen says, we added this line to the file. No, that's only really a line-by-line set of diffs. So if I change like a word in the middle of the thing and say I deleted that old line and I added a new line, so no. So we can do what it says. We can git add again. So add planlist.txt. Look at the status now. The status has changed a little bit. So instead of saying, this thing is being, well, let me go up a bit. Instead of saying that it's, not staged for the commit, it now says that these changes are to be committed. So what we can do is git commit and say, I don't know. And that will save a commit to your history. So now it says, okay, we have made a commit with this message. One file was changed and we inserted one line. And now to actually look at what that means, look at git log. You can see we have a sort of look back into the history of what commits were made. So you see what it recorded is that it says, okay, I wrote this thing, or this commit. It was made today, 6:41. And this is the message I gave describing what happened in that commit. And then before that, there was the first commit, which was also made by B, but 5 minutes earlier. And it has some annotation about what's master and that sort of stuff, but it's not really important. This by itself is nice, but I like to add a couple of flags. So I like to git log graph. And really all it does is add this line on the side. If you were working by yourself, that line should just be a straight line, right? But when you start collaborating with people, there are points where it might split because somebody's working on something independently of you. And then it might come back together and you'd be like, okay, well, when did that happen? Or, why did this change at that point or the time or whatever? We probably will talk about that more next week in the collaborating, like open source talk that we'll have next week. But for now, it's probably just going to be a straight line. So I'm going to add one more thing. So I'm going to add like fire.text. Be like, you should put your own name here. Oh, I assume none of you are named Elliot. Oh, I accidentally used them. Oops. Ignore the Vim thing. Don't type in. Yeah.
What's the VI?
It's a different editor. It's just muscle memory. I accidentally typed it. I didn't mean to. Use nano. So you can type your name there or something like that. Lines, let's say. And I'm going to write that out. And if we look at our status again, this is slightly different from before because Git has not known about this buyer.txt. So instead of saying something like modified file or something like that, it says that this is an untracked file because Git doesn't know you want to keep track of it, basically. Press :Q and enter. That doesn't work. Press escape a few times first. And then use Q exclamation point instead of Q. If it's still stuck, I can come and look. Is it okay? So like I said, this file, Git doesn't know anything about it. So what I'm going to do is git add text. Look at the status again. Now it says, okay, Git knows there's a new file added. Hasn't been committed yet, but it says, okay, there's a new file you want to keep track of. And you can do git commit. Something like add my biography or something. And again, you get the same message, with the short line of what your message was, and the one file change, 2 insertions. If I started editing more than one file, it would say something about more than one file, but it didn't. Let's see how this works with GitHub. Everybody's okay with Git so far? Oh, yes, no? So if we go to, where's GitHub? GitHub. We log in. I'm already logged in, but let's go to github.com. We go to T-coders. And be a sandbox. All right, well, we use this old one. It's fine. So github.com/ustcoder/sandbox-2017. Sure. Okay. So I left the link there. If you can't see it, just go to the event page.
Where is that? Part of the email?
Yes, and it's also here. github.com/uftcoders/events/issues/169. So if you're on this page, right now this page is a repository, but it's owned by UFT coders. And none of you will have permission to do anything to it. So the first thing you want to do is make a fork. And if you remember the slide from before, let's see if we have the slide here somewhere. So like the original repo is over there, is the UFT coder sandbox one. So we're going to make a fork, which will mean that it'll be a whole copy of the repository, but it's owned by you. Let us press the fork button. I have already forked it, so my link is here. But what you should get is that it should change the URL. So instead of saying UFT coders here, it says your username. Yep. Username where? Oh, you mean the Git config?
How can I do this UFT coders and we get the same thing?
Oh, you mean here, right?
Yeah.
Beginning? No, this is just the name that describes your commits. So it's the name that goes, where'd the log go? The name that goes here,
Okay.
right? It doesn't have anything to do with the login name that you use on GitHub.
Okay. But how can we see that on GitHub?
I'll get to that in a second.
Okay.
So after we made a fork, there's this green button here, which is clone or download. So you can copy this. You'll probably want to use HTTPS. Probably don't have this set up. So you will get something like HTTPS github.com/your username/sandbox2017. You copy that. And if you go back here, so git clone this thing. And then paste that there. Now, if you do that, you should not get any username prompts or anything like that, because currently these repositories are all public. So just making a copy of it on your computer is fine. You don't need any login or anything. But if you want to push something back there, you need your login. So now if we look here, I have a sandbox 2017. I really should have put that up a level, but that's fine. So I'm going to change to this directory. Got some files that have been already created from before. So what happened if we go look back here? Let's make this a little bigger. Here, there's a bunch of files that were already in this repository: A file, B file, C file, example file, etc. So when we made a clone of it onto your computer, it got all the information about those files and whatever that were there. And if we look in that directory, we should have a bunch of files. I don't remember if that's what it looks like directly from the clone, because I made changes myself. But, does everybody have all the same files, or? Oh yeah, there's some demo files. Sure. I mean, it should really look like this because you just created your fork. So you should have something that looks exactly like this one. My fork is a bit updated, so it's missing some files, but that's fine. So, yep.
Where are the files?
So right now, I was in desktop sandbox where I started my thing, and then I cloned it again in that folder, so it's a sandbox. I probably shouldn't have put it recursively, but that's how it is. So for now, we won't do like anything complicated. We'll just try and keep things in sync with what's on GitHub. And then maybe we'll do like pull requests and branching stuff like next week. So there's basically only 2 commands you need to remember to keep this thing in sync. For now, we're going to pretend like the UFT coders one doesn't exist, and it's just you and that one copy on GitHub. Just you're trying to keep your thesis in sync or something like that. So let's say I edit a file, or I keep typing that. And I'll say, which files do you have? Example? Yeah, okay. I'll edit a.file.txt, which is empty, apparently. So I will say, I don't know, information. I'm very creative today. And we will save that. Exit. If you look at the Git status, again, like before, when you edit a file, it'll say that it's modified, but it hasn't been staged for commit. I didn't really explain what staging means because it can be a little confusing. But for now, all you need to know is you need to add everything to be staged before you make your commit. So I'm going to add, well, actually, first I'll check the diff. And it says, OK, I added this new line here, which is what I expect. So I'm going to add a file.txt. And commit that. Add new information. Again, I'm very creative today. So same thing again. And now we've made another commit. And if we look at the status, it's slightly different from before. It still says that there's nothing to commit and the working tree is clean, but it also mentions that you're now ahead of origin/master and some other message that doesn't make sense right now. But what this is saying right now is that you've made a commit on your computer, but GitHub doesn't know about it, right? Because, like I said a long time ago, Git is distributed, so that means that the changes you make on one computer are not necessarily on another computer until you actually tell it to go to that other computer, or you pull it from the other computer, or sync it in some way. This sounds annoying, but it is kind of helpful in a way because you can sort of do parallel work in different places, stuff like that. And you don't necessarily need to rely on GitHub. You can sync with your laptop, with your work computer directly if you wanted to, or you could sync with a coworker's laptop directly if you wanted to. You don't necessarily have to work off of a main place that may or may not be available if you don't have a network or something like that. So, but it does tell you what to do. It says git push. So I'm going to git push. And what that does, actually, before I do that, I'm going to go git log. And I'm going to add one more all. And this will look very messy, probably. But before I said it would be all straight line, because that sandbox was sort of like a mix of me working with other people in a lesson and stuff like that. You see this sort of a split here, but don't worry about that for now. The important thing is that the 2 things marked master are the important things. So there's master in green over there, which is referring to your computer and what commit it's on. And then there's origin/master over there, which I can't really shadow very well, but over here, which refers to where GitHub is. So ignoring this one, we are one more commit ahead of GitHub. So if you get this little colon and block thing here. Press Q to exit. So now I'm going to do git push like it suggested. And it will prompt for a username and a password. And I don't know my password because it's saved, so I'm not going to do that. Okay, you don't have to do this. I need to do this because I don't know what my password is. So I'm going to copy this. I'll copy this because it won't make any sense. Okay. So because I don't have my password available, I have it set up with an SSH key. So I changed it to use that connection. But you probably won't have an SSH key set up because you probably just signed up for GitHub yesterday or something. So don't type that line. Oh, well, yeah, I need to pick something. Anyway. You can ignore what I'm doing. But anyway, let's see what it does. Okay, ignore those like 10 lines because they don't make any sense to you. Okay. And if we go back to our thing, GitHub here, and then you will see it has something, latest commit 2017 probably. If I hit refresh now after doing git push, you should have a thing, it should say now 5 minutes ago because I just made a commit. I just pushed it. Has everybody got that, or did it all update for everybody? See, half of you said yes, and half of you are just staring at the computer. So I'm gonna wait till everybody says yes. Yeah.
So essentially, it's like work on the computer, get pushed, it goes back to GitHub, it gets synced there.
Yeah. So right now, this doesn't really seem any different from like Dropbox or something, right? Yep.
So right now, everyone is doing the same thing. And
yep.
Push up.
Yep.
I mean, for report, everyone made.
Good question, but the answer is no, because you all made a fork. So now on GitHub, you all have a copy of the original one, and you're only working with your copy. Because I mean, looks like rat bag. So there's the original one over there, which is USB coders. You made this fork here, which is your username on GitHub, and then you made a clone from that, right? So when you did push, it pushes here, but it doesn't know anything about that. When you want to start collaborating between people like that, that's when you start using pull requests and such things. I don't think we have time to really go into that today, just because introduction. But I think we'll cover that next week. But for now, we're just really looking at like syncing stuff for yourself, right? So you don't have to worry about other people's forks that they make. Yeah.
So even before the push and pull, if we're just adding and committing locally, that would be the same as doing like saving multiple versions.
Pretty much, yes. Yeah.
But just cleaner.
Yeah. But at this point, I mean, what I could do is look at the log, okay, and hopefully I've given things descriptive messages, and I could go look in the back and say like, okay, well, at this point in time is the change that I made that I wanted to go look at, and then I could go back in time and look at that. What time? Let's see if we can do that. 7 o'clock now. I forget what the schedule was for. 7 or 7:30? 7. Yeah. All right. So I mean, if people are interested in me talking about it, I can talk about it. But I mean, I think we'll go into that next week too. So I mean, if you guys have to leave or whatever. Again, this is really a very high-level introductory look at Git. So I mean, right now it doesn't look complicated. It also doesn't look very helpful. Maybe, I don't know. It depends on what you're trying to do. But when we get into some more collaborative things, that's where it really becomes beneficial. Where you start working with the rest of your group, or you start working on some open source project with 100 people who you've never met. That's where it becomes more useful. But even if you're just working on it by yourself, which is what I do for all of my stuff, it's just useful for keeping, say, your laptop and your home computer and your work computer in sync if you are like me and a bad grad student who doesn't know when to not work. And I work all the time. You can work wherever you want. And you don't have to worry about not being able to access anything over the network or stuff like that. So anyway, since it's 7 o'clock, you guys can go, but if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. I'm gonna end this live stream thing.